everyone, it's me Bo back here on the Film Scene Investigation channel. In this video I'm going to be reviewing the controversial 1974 motion picture, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is a movie that I watched many years ago and I've always thought of it very fondly. Before we jump into the review, if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing. Your support is greatly appreciated. So, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed by the late Tobe Hooper, was this independently made 70s horror movie that really has become one of the ultimate cult classics in modern cinema. Produced for under $1 million, this film was Hooper's third feature as director. The movie was released over 45 years ago, and in that time has gained an enormous amount of popularity and spawned several sequels. It's almost become a horror staple alongside the likes of Halloween and the Friday the 13th franchise. Now, I first came across the Texas Chainsaw Massacre when it first appeared on DVD back in 2002. The film had been unfairly banned here in the UK for over 20 years before it got an official release. At that time, I'd heard about the film from my cousin Anthony, but I'd never seen the trailer or anything like that. I mean, don't forget, this was pre-YouTube, so pulling up videos on your phone was, just non-existent. So from what I heard, I was intrigued and kind of unsure what to expect. So the film followed a group of young adults as they traveled through rural Texas in search of a family grave. Eventually, their van ran out of gas, which led them to seek help from the locals in the area. They stumbled upon an old rundown farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. I remember watching it for the first time and just thinking to myself, guys, you really shouldn't go in there, without being invited first. It just seemed like the wrong idea, but then again, this group seemed to be massively naive. Chaos then ensued when the group discovered the house belonged to a family of cannibals, which included the chainsaw-wielding maniac, Leatherface. Played by actor Gunnar Hansen in his debut role, the Leatherface character brought a whole new level of brutality to the big screen. He was this towering man smeared in blood and wearing a mask made of human skin. I mean, just visually, it was a really frightening look and aesthetic. And just like other horror icons like Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger, the Leatherface character has become a legendary figure in the world of horror. So once Leatherface showed up, the teens were systematically killed off until there was only one left, that being Sally, played by the late Marilyn Burns. She soon found herself kidnapped by the family of cannibals and forcibly made to attend this macabre family dinner. One of the most scariest aspects of this movie was the pure randomness of the whole disgusting situation. The family never planned this, they never set out to go on a killing spree and hunt down teenagers. This group just found themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. In the lead up to the murders, Sally and the group showed this blind faith towards people they encountered during their road trip. But this approach ultimately got them in serious danger. I don't know. I just think these days Teenagers in that kind of situation wouldn't be so eager to pick up hitchhikers or to roam around people's property without them knowing. But back in the 70s, the early 70s especially, it was a different time and people had different attitudes. People back then were generally more trusting towards others. So the random, uncompromising terror that the group experienced definitely scared audiences stiff and made them second guess their trust in society. Let's take a moment to reflect on the actors that starred in the film. Many of the cast were relatively unknown, some of whom Toby Hooper knew personally. For many, it was their big opportunity to break into the film industry. These group of actors were hungry for success, and that perseverance and determination definitely showed on screen. While some actors did better than others, I really felt that everyone was really trying hard to do their best work. Given the lack of experience on set, it's actually quite surprising just how well things turned out. Not only was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre a grueling horror to watch, but the making of the movie was also very difficult. The long shoot days, the high humidity, and the limited production budget all took their toll on the cast and crew. The actors especially were at risk of severe dehydration, which only made matters worse. By all accounts, it was one hell of a grind, so massive respect to the cast and crew for continuing to work in such unbearable conditions. While the whole cast were solid in their respective roles, I did think that Marilyn Burns delivered a standout performance as Sally, the lone survivor of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Throughout the movie, we saw her character experience some truly terrible things, but somehow, some way, she kept on fighting and eventually escaped. While she survived, it was clear she was emotionally and mentally broken. That was very telling in the last moments of the movie when we saw Sally sitting in the back of a pickup truck completely covered in blood. After escaping the clutches of Leatherface, she began manically laughing to herself. I must say, it was very creepy to see Sally react the way she did. She had completely lost it. She couldn't grasp the fact that she'd actually survived, like it was all too much for her to handle. I know some people call that survivor's guilt, and it definitely seemed that way. Really great work from the late Marilyn Burns, who was very believable in her role as someone the audience could get behind and easily root for. It's safe to say that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is far from your average gory slasher. There were ideas and themes inserted into the story, that had real significance. One aspect I don't see many people talk about would be the family's declined mental state and how they represented the continued decline of the American dream and nuclear family. We meet this dysfunctional, cannibalistic family isolated from the outside world. But what you have to remember is they didn't start out that way. The family were led into this madness due to the rising technological revolution. Here's a family that used to run a successful slaughterhouse. They used to be happy, but eventually got replaced by machines. They had practically been left behind. Society seemed to have forgotten about them, and they were left to rot. And they did. They did rot, and they were left to their own devices, and we see the results of that play out in this movie. the hidden meaning behind the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was that the family's downfall was a symbolic acknowledgement of the death of the American spirit and the loss of traditional values. The rapidly changing America that we saw post-World War II was always going to create new winners and new losers, and this family was sadly caught up in the crossfire. Of course, I'm not trying to condone cannibalism or anything like that, but I'm just merely pointing out the deeper meaning behind the gory violence that we saw on screen. Given the limited budget Tobe Hooper was working with, credit to him and cinematographer Daniel Pearl, who created some compelling imagery for the film. There were some interesting camera angles and extreme close-ups that were used that made the film feel a lot more dynamic. You know, one of my favourite visuals of the whole entire film would be at the very end when Leatherface goes crazy after unsuccessfully catching Sally. Leatherface was upset that Sally escaped and started manically waving his chainsaw around as the sun rose in the background. The camera work was brilliantly executed as it closed in on Leatherface spinning around on the dusty road. The framing was perfect, and you know, in a way it kind of captured the beauty and the horror in one single shot. And I don't know whose exact idea it was, I assume it was Tobe Hooper's, but the idea behind implementing the handheld camera movements just made the whole thing feel like a documentary. Yeah, very simple, but it just worked so well, and such an enthralling way to end your movie. The score, produced by Tobe Hooper and musician Wayne Bell, was extremely atmospheric and ominous. There's no denying that it played a major factor in helping the movie create tension. And more to the point, it was used sparingly and just at the right times. Now, a lot of horror movies these days, and you know, throughout the years, have had this tendency to repeatedly use overly dramatic scare music. You know, I can't be dealing with that, but with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that wasn't the case. We were presented with this bleak, minimalist set design that complemented the ugliness the film showcased. Tobe Hooper made a massive contribution towards the film's music and whole aesthetic, and massive credit to him. To my knowledge, unlike fellow horror director John Carpenter, Hooper, I don't believe, had a musical background, so the fact that he was so involved with the score, yeah, just very impressive, all things considered. And so, dislikes for Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1974. My main dislike for the movie would be the slow pacing that we saw at the beginning. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand what Hooper was doing, establishing the characters and their surroundings. It's just, I find myself rewatching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and generally fast forwarding through the first 15 minutes. Yeah, it's safe to say that it does take a while for things to get going. It's only really when Leatherface shows up that the pace really picks up and everything starts to fall into place. You know, it's not really a huge issue, and given this was a product of the 70's, having movies start slow was kind of the norm back then. I just think, in retrospect, Tobe Hooper could have easily have removed maybe 5 to 10 minutes of footage from the beginning and had Leatherface appear much sooner. And so, ratings for Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1974. I'm going to be rating this movie a solid 8 out of 10. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was this pioneering horror that should be praised for its significance in 70s cinema. The movie obliterated genre conventions and pushed boundaries to new levels not seen at the time. The movie was this unsettling portrait of a depraved, sadistic family that made you question whether families like theirs could actually exist in this world. After repeat viewings of this movie, it did get me thinking about the other victims that the family may have killed. And separately to that, would Sally ever be able to fully recover from her traumatic experience? Not everything was explained, and it made the viewer think deeper about the story and its aftermath, which I really liked. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a movie that I do come back to every few years. It has this uniquely dark tone that very few films have been able to achieve. Even the Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequels that came later were never really able to successfully capture the same vibe, making this entry in the series a real standout. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen this movie, and if you have, please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Does this movie deserve high praise? And for those who have not seen it, definitely do so. It's a high recommendation from me. Well, that's all from me today, guys, in this video. Hope you have enjoyed it. It has been really nice to reflect on this awesome slasher from the 70s. I, of course, will be back next week with more cult movie reviews. Take care, everyone, and yeah,